In fact, history does not belong to us, but we belong to it.
Between inflation and deflation, and the Fed has been fighting deflation since the tech bubble burst, and that's what they've been doing. It's a disaster, and they've gotten to the point where the tyranny of the bond math is such that they can't raise interest rates without collapsing the whole system.
This is a 30-year yield. It has an inverse relationship with the bond market. As bonds sell off, the 30-year yield spikes. You can see from 1988 till now, the trend has been downwards, but suddenly we broke out of that trend. Interest rates are important to every aspect of our economy because it determines how much it costs to borrow money.
Yeah, so one of the signposts for deflation starting to set in is the 30-year long bond. It's putting in what we believe to be an important 3-year cycle low, put in a weekly swing low, and the timing band for this low is either now or in the next couple of weeks. So I think you're going to see the long bond start to come in yield-wise, up in price. That'll be the first indication that the economy is starting to really collapse. Then short-term interest rates will follow after that. The Fed will jawbone and say they're fighting inflation, maybe raise 1 or 2 more times, but they're making a huge policy error, and they can't raise rates. They're trapped. And that's why a new monetary system's coming, and this is all smoke and mirrors, and there's going to be all sorts of explanations as to why the economy is collapsing.
Our economy is fake. It's built off of easy, cheap money. If money becomes expensive, the whole system collapses. We've heard rhetoric of a new Breton Woods, and it's coming.
Now we are in a similar kind of Breton Woods moment. We have to reconstruct, we have to rebuild from the hit of COVID-19. And at the same time, we have to transform our economies to be greener, to be fairer, actually to be digital everywhere, so everybody has access to this digital transformation. So we do have a new Breton Woods moment in that sense. Does it mean we have to create new institutions? I actually, not because I'm in one of them, this is not self-preservation. I see these institutions having evolved with time, doing what needs to be done today to protect the world economy from significant harm. If we didn't exist, if we didn't have the World Bank, the IMF, and other institutions, we have to be honest, the world would have been in recession that would have gotten deeper into depression. So we would have had yet another Great Depression.
Breton Woods is where the world came together to establish a new financial system. If the 30-year yield spikes, that means that the bond market is sold off and the Fed has to get into the bond market and start buying up all the 30-year bonds. This would lead to a catastrophe. And the only bank that could bail out the United States is the IMF with a special drawing right.
Actually, to be digital everywhere, so everybody has access to this digital transformation.
We know that Ripple is in bed with the IMF.
If you remember, I came on in February and talked about the global economy and the end of the monetary system as we know it. Global debt is starting to collapse. And I said credit markets and equity markets would be unhinged, and that's what we've seen. More importantly, it's going to continue, and it's going to start to accelerate. Bottom line is the Fed is trapped. There's some indicators that I follow with some other people that suggest that the rate hike cycle was over before it started. So they're tightening into a disaster. They should be actually loosening credit conditions, pumping money into the system, believe it or not. So they're...
The Fed is trapped and they're left with no options but to print. This is a correlation between money printing and the S&P. This is a correlation between Bitcoin and world stocks. Every move in the market is correlated to money printing. The Fed has announced that they're going to fight inflation by stopping the printing presses, but we know this is a lie because the whole system collapses if they do.
No, generally a bottom, and I've seen this movie so many times before, is you need a big institution to go bankrupt. That always helps. I mean, you have to sacrifice an institution to get this to work, because then you get a dramatic flushing of equity positions as panic sets in. Margin calls are called in, shorts, are bought. They basically bought themselves in already, and then you get this big leg down. Usually it's 5 to 10%, and that is the bottoming process we need. Now, this time I was thinking it might be in the crypto space, but that's already been decimated, and so it may be something else, a financial services company, or there was some rumors about Coinbase that turned out not to be true. But you need somebody's offside somewhere on a leveraged hedge position. You just don't know who it is yet, and they're big. And we're going to wake up in the next 10 days, 20 days, and you're going to find out they're a zero. That's a good thing, and I'm waiting for that to happen because we're getting close to a bottom here.
So far, the markets have moved in an orderly way. When the markets move in a disorderly way, that's when the Fed pivots.
Peace. Right. And Janet's not known for being a hard edge. So when she speaks, I think she means it. And I think it's a message we saw to India earlier this week, to President Modi. We're hearing it for the Chinese. I think they need to make a decision about where they are in this crisis.
Do you have any sense as to what our response might be, though, if they don't? And, again, when she says, to Carl's point, no benign interpretation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and China says, and does nothing, what do we then do?
Well, there's always secondary sanctions, which would have a huge impact on Chinese or Indian institutions. Also in Washington, there's a number of pieces of legislation sort of sitting on the sidelines, waiting to be implemented, focused on China and other countries, which would impact capital flows.
Yeah, but it would impact a lot of other things, too, wouldn't it?
Huge collateral damage.
Huge.
That's why you don't want to do it unless you absolutely have to. But I think this is clear messaging that they're willing to ratchet up if they don't see the kind of action they want.
Every country in this world produces in order to consume, except for the United States. The U.S. is in control of the world reserve currency and can print money and buy others' production. A Breton Woods is something everyone would invite because they would still need to produce in order to consume, and getting rid of the dollar means no more tax and no more control over the financial system. Russia was sanctioned by the U.S. China and India have continued trade with Russia for cheap commodities. Yellen has warned about secondary sanctions, meaning if you trade with Russia, we will also sanction you. China is the second largest economy in the world, and if they were sanctioned, the whole global economy would be disrupted.
China is seeking to replenish its strategic crude reserves with cheap Russian oil, strengthening energy ties with Moscow just as Europe works to ban imports. Sources tell us Beijing is in government-level talks with Russia to buy additional supplies, with little direct involvement from oil companies. Russian crude prices have tumbled as buyers step away to avoid being swept up in financial sanctions.
This is a map of global GDP. Notice how China is over $5 trillion and India is between $1.6 and $2.7 trillion. Think about what were to happen if China and India were sanctioned. Think about everything that's in your house that says made in China or made in India.
I think we have risks from all the things we have at the moment. So clearly we could get more supply chain disruption in China. Ukraine, I'm afraid, is the big one in a way, and I'll boil that down to two things. One is obviously an further energy price shock. I think that would now come more from the cutting off of gas and distillate supply. So that's distillated products like diesel. Ukraine and Russia, I should say here, because it's a combination of the two of them, obviously. Crude oil isn't so much the issue. I think it's what would happen from a disruption. And then I'm afraid the one that I'm going to sound, I guess, rather apocalyptic about is food.
The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey is apocalyptic about food shortages. Central bank governors are usually very careful on what they say because they don't want to scare the markets.
This is a big concern because I think two things that the Ukrainian finance minister said. One is Ukraine does have food in store, but it can't get it out at the moment. Two, while he was optimistic about crop planting as you know, Ukraine is a major supplier of wheat, a major supplier of oil, of cooking oils. And he said, he was pretty optimistic about planting, interestingly, but he said at the moment, we have no way of shipping it out. As things stand at the moment, it's getting worse. And that is a major worry, and it's not just, I have to tell you, a major worry for this country, it is a major worry for the developing world as well. And so if I had to sorry for being apocalyptic for a moment, but that's a major concern.
Russia and the Ukraine produce a quarter of the world's wheat. Some countries, particularly in Africa, are dependent on the wheat exports. Will these countries evade sanctions in order to prevent famine?
Also on the food, the comments from Yellen on the potential food crisis, so to speak, and the vulnerabilities in the global food system. How real is that in your opinion?
It's very real. I was just telling Sarah, I've been to eastern Ukraine. It's a breadbasket. It looks like Kansas. And once you start cordoning off 20 or 30% of the world's wheat or other kinds of barley or oat, you have real impact on prices. And it remains to be seen who's going to make up at the margin.
The problem is we just don't know where this is going. We don't know when the war is going to end.
Right.
We hope sooner than later. We don't know when the supply chains are coming back. Now they're getting worse with China. So in that kind of environment, how do you plan and what is the outlook?
Yeah, I think Jamie hit the nail on the head today. We don't know. It's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. But we do know with higher inflation, historic levels, supply chain still stress, China locked down, potentially hanging in the balance, and a war that in Europe that continues to go on in a protracted way. And we just saw President Putin today say he's not interested in peace. So this isn't going away anytime soon.
Energy and food prices will continue to rise. It was announced that Biden is thinking about blocking debt payments of Russia. Debts are someone's assets. If Russia defaults on their debts, who loses?
Well, obviously they're setting the stage for a new monetary system. All this talk about central bank digital currency, China's trying to launch one. So there's a new system coming. We have another Breton Woods coming ahead of us. The question is, who controls how that is formed and shaped?
Crypto assets are protocols that are trustless. No one person or entity is able to control the money. Now think about everything that is going on. A collapse in the global economy is a collapse in all societies, and nobody wants that. The reset that we have been hearing about will take place on updated infrastructure that is trustless. The Breton Woods moment is coming, and crypto assets are needed to build this new financial system. Long before we understand ourselves through the process of self-examination, we understand ourselves in a self-evident way in the family, society, and state in which we live. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you're interested in supporting this channel, I have a Patreon.